Welcome everybody to another developer cast here on the channel. I am of course Josh Placer, and we have another great evening for you tonight. We're going to be talking to the developer of the upcoming game Viola, and this game is different by the fact that it's combining both RPG gameplay and platformer design into a single gameplay loop, or into several. And we have the developer on now to talk about things. And because my audios are killing me, I'm afraid I may butcher his name horribly. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, feel free.
All right, hey guys, I'm Jelle Van Doorne. I'm a game developer, designer, creator, writer, everything from the Netherlands, and I'm the sole creator of Viola.
All right. It is great to have you on today. What is the time difference, by the way, right now?
It is slightly past 9 p.m. here.
Okay, so just about
So
6 hours.
Yeah, 6 hours. There's about.
All right. Well, it is a pleasure to have you on. For people tuning in for this live or recorded, I did play Viola as part of a spotlight a few weeks ago. This was the build that would be going up right around the time the game is hitting early access, and it is going to be on early access on July 23rd. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. And we definitely had a lot of fun with it, and I'm happy to have you on because I have a lot of questions, and it's always great to talk to developers about their designs. So,
Yep.
before we get too far, or before we start diving deep into the gameplay of Viola, could you talk a little bit about kind of your background in the game industry?
Sure. This is my first solo endeavor as an indie developer. Before this, I worked at a mobile game company in Eindhoven.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Game House, and we sort of made these Diner Dash-esque clones.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, just you have a shop that you're running, customers come in, you tap them away, that sort of stuff, and there would be little mini stories between each level. Like at the start of each level, you'd have a little cutscene, and at the end. And every game from that company would have its own little theme. So some would be airport, others would be fashion, which is what I worked on. Others were restaurant. And I got laid off from that at some point. We weren't making enough millions of downloads. So they let half the studio go at that point. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity for me to just go indie and just do it by myself.
Great. And how long have you been working on Viola for, Yella?
It's been since March last year.
Okay. And one question I always like to ask our guests when I'm talking internationally: how is the rest of the game industry, whether it's from or as either a AAA or independent side in the Netherlands right now?
Well, Guerrilla Games is essentially the only real AAA developer in our country, famous from Horizon Zero Dawn and
Okay.
Killzone. Um, they're really the only one doing AAA games. The rest is all indie and mobile, and a lot of what's it called? Serious games. So a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
educational games or games for companies. Those are really popular in here. But we're rather small, even though there are a lot of companies doing it. We're rather small and unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I think if have you ever played Reus? That's one that I can point at. That's like a big indie title. I think they recently released another game
Yeah.
in the same sort of genre. Godhood, I think it's called.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I am definitely familiar with Abbey Games. I've been playing their games
Exactly.
since Ruse, and I think we are actually scheduled, hopefully, in the coming weeks to have them on for a follow-up cast about what's going on with Godhood.
Oh, that'd be fun to listen to.
Mm-hmm. But yeah. So with Viola, I guess what game engine are you using for designing it? It looks kind of like Game Maker to me, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's made with Unity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I guess with the design of Viola, I guess where did it come from in terms of combining the RPG and the platformer gameplay?
Yeah, so it came from playing Lisa when it came
Oh.
out and being extremely unsatisfied with it, actually. Even though it's such a popular game that's widely regarded as being really good, it came out like around the same time that Undertale came out, and people were like, "Lisa's just as good as Undertale." I was like, "I gotta get on this. I gotta play this." And I was so disappointed by it, mostly because it is a side-scrolling platformer-esque game, as
Hmm.
in you go from left to right and you climb ledges, but it's so slow. And if you ever fall down from like a height of two ledges, you take falling damage, and it really frustrated me while playing it. Even though I thought there were some interesting elements in there, like the party system, how you could recruit different kinds of characters based on like what you were doing in the game, and that's where that unsatisfactory feeling is sort of what spawned Viola, or at least what spawned the idea of combining a 2D platformer with a JRPG.
And I think that's one of the more interesting aspects about Viola that I was playing compared to other games that have kind of used the platformer side as kind of the base for something else. So I'm sure you've played, puzzle platformers and even stuff like even like something like Super Mario RPG or Paper Mario.
Right.
That it's like the platformer is the base, and then you have the RPG side, but a lot of the issues with these games, as you said, is that the platformer gameplay kind of feels secondary. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it doesn't feel good in your hands from a platforming point of view. And for those of you watching this around live recorded, my second book is actually going into pretty much a deep dive into platforming design. I spent most of 2019 playing nothing but platformers, so I've had a chance to grit my teeth on that. And what I found very fascinating playing Viola is that the platforming gameplay, it feels like a real platformer. Like I was surprised when I was actually able to do a triple jump with the main character in
Yeah.
the game. And
Yeah.
I guess what kind of inspired you to have more of an emphasis on the platforming compared to these other games?
Hmm. Well, the triple jump in particular came from just playtesting. I was just testing the game with people, and at the time you could only jump and do a wall jump. Uh, and I just had like a survey. I just had people take a survey and just rank every element of the game based on how fun it was. Like just walking, attacking, blocking, using spells, jumping, wall jumping, what was fun, what wasn't fun. And jumping would specifically be regarded as not fun. People did not enjoy jumping in Viola at first. I was like, oh, that's a problem for a game that's 50% platforming, right? So that's sort of what spawned the idea of like, okay, I want to expand on these jumping mechanics. That's why I added the triple jump to it, and also because it's sort of a balancing act between platformer and RPG. If I make the platforming part too much fun, people don't want to do the RPG stuff anymore, and vice versa as well.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why like Viola doesn't have some mechanics like dashing that's popular in games like Celeste, which are really tight platformers. There's no dashes in Viola specifically, so that the game's a little bit slower on the platformer side, so that the RPG stuff is just a little bit more fun, but doesn't overtake the platforming.
And with Viola, like in terms of like the design itself, as you said, like one of the things that we see from a lot of these games, especially when they come from independent developers who tend to combine different genres into a single game, is that one usually falls by the wayside. I'm enjoying
Yeah,
this side, but then I have to go do this, and it's not as interesting.
exactly.
Or you end up with a case where both elements feel, lesser. Like it doesn't feel like a well put together RPG or well put together shooter in some cases, and you're kind of left with this experience that doesn't really mesh well. And with the game, I guess from the get go, was it always going to be a platformer RPG, or did you have other game systems you were testing with it?
It was always going to be a platformer RPG. That was my the hook that I started the game with. That was like, okay, this is an interesting, unique selling point for something to sell the game on. Essentially, it's sort of capitalistic almost to say like, oh, that didn't come from your mind as an artistic expression. Like, no, no, these two things that already existed. No, I'm going to put those together and that'll sell. It's sort of weird to say, but that's kind of how it and it's working. Like
Mhm.
people are interested just by hearing like, oh, I'm making a platform RPG. People are excited about that.
Hmm.
So it was always going to be a platformer RPG. The one thing that I did experiment on at the start of the game was the musical elements of it. Um, when I just started out, I was basically still learning how to do basic C sharp with Unity. And I figured, I'm just going to make a couple of mechanics and see, just to learn more and see what's fun and what isn't fun. And then I made the mechanic of playing the instrument, similar to how Zelda works. And I just thought, like, yeah, it's a fun throwaway thing. You can have like your party members and they'll play instruments as well. But people really responded super well to that, and people were more excited about it, just knowing that they could play the instruments and that there was like a musical element to it. And they were really excited about it, even if in the playtest it didn't do anything, right?
Hmm.
Just the possibility made people excited.
Yeah, like we've seen like a few musical or musical inspired RPGs in the past. The one that's like popping to my mind, I think it was even called Rhapsody. I think this was a PlayStation 1 title. I think it was like, I want to say 97, 98. But it's been a very long time since we've seen games kind of have that musical theme to it. I guess, do you have any background with music that kind of helped you with the game?
No,
Hmm.
not at all. I've played when I was young. I played the concert flute, the sideways long like brass sort of flute, and I was really really bad at it. And I found out that I'm a little bit tone deaf actually.
Well, that's good. I'm completely tone deaf when it comes to music, so I think we're good
So
there.
you're in trouble playing viola.
Oh, good.
No, it's not that. That also sort of inspired me to not make it as musical. How do you put it? You don't need to know music theory. You
That's
don't need to
good.
read notes. Even
Oh,
the
thank
rhythm
you.
sections in the RPGs are just more like QTEs rather
Hmm.
than actual rhythm game stuff. Partly because like I know that people just have trouble with that. Not everybody has the same amount of rhythm. I sure don't. I'm bad at rhythm games.
Oh, yes.
So I
Uh,
figured like, okay, that's gonna be more. It's gonna be a theme rather than like the hook itself.
hmm Yeah, like for myself, like going back to an RPG, like if you remember Super Mario RPG had like those musical sections where you had to play the songs, and I could not do any of that. Like I cannot read sheet music, anything that involves like matching notes or melodies, you know, that's
Yeah,
out. Like I can play Dark Souls easily. I can that game is easy for me, but I can't do a piano-based puzzle to save my life.
yeah. No, I have the same issue. That's why the mechanics started out so simple and the same as Zelda, where you're just using the 8 notes and you can often just copy the pattern or just and just like in Zelda, you can go into your menu and say, okay, I want to play this song, and it'll like appear opaque, so you can just input the numbers, that input the buttons that it says instead of remembering the entire song.
Hmm. Now, with Viola, with the RP, we've talked about the platforming for a little bit, and I will come back to that in a minute or so. But on the RPG side of things, I guess what inspired you for that kind of gameplay for the title?
I just love RPGs. This is my favorite genre. My favorite game of all time is Lufia 2: Rise of the Sinistrals on the Super Nintendo.
Mm.
That's one of the first games I played as a kid. My grandfather would have this. He had the strategy guide for it, and he gently tore out every page of it and put it in plastic, and like had a folder for it that we could always read it and always beat the game because it was quite difficult. It was quite a difficult game. But that was the first JRPG that I've ever played, and it was in Dutch. And I was 4 or 5 years old at the time, so my English was a little weak. And I was like, "Wow, there's stuff happening in this game. This is weird. This is new." And I loved it. And ever since then, I've just loved RPGs. So when I started thinking about, okay, what kind of game do I want to make? Just RPG came to my mind instantly.
Yeah, but like for myself, I've had kind of like a in and out of like loving and hating RPGs for the last, oh my goodness, like at least 10, 15 years. Like, I grew up during the NES era, so I played Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and then that led into playing again a lot of the Super Nintendo ones. And I think like these days, I really haven't found like a turn-based RPG that I could fall in love with. I think the last one that I really enjoyed was Xenoblade Chronicles on, I
Hmm.
think that was the Wii when that one came out.
Yeah, there's a part two of that.
Oh yeah, I still need to pick that one up if I can ever find the time to play it.
Yeah, that's sort of the problem with these
Hmm.
RPGs usually is that they're such huge endeavors. Like, I know I have Final Fantasy VII like somewhere in my library, but it's like, oh man, I really want to sit through like, and it's so old at this point. Do I really want to sit through 80 hours of that when I could just wait a while and play the remake?
Yeah. On stream, like usually once a week we do a classic game night, and one week I decided to play Chrono Trigger again, and I'm like, we could do a full run of this. We may just be sitting here for like the next like 50 to 80 hours, though. Like I don't know how many people want to do that all over again.
Well, the beauty of Chrono Trigger is that it's actually like comparatively, it's quite short.
Hmm.
Like if you're comparing it to like the Final Fantasies, for instance, those were way
Oh
longer than Chrono
yes.
Trigger.
Hmm. And Shin Megami Tensei, like those more challenging RPGs are available as well now, with like
Yeah.
Persona kind of like being like the breakout hit now these days.
Yeah, I did. I've never actually tackled either of those games, so I wouldn't know anything about them. I'm waiting for the for Persona 5R before I dive into that
Oh,
series.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be the wise move when they do like when they do kind of like the remaster or the second edition of it.
Yeah.
I guess here's a question for you, Yella. In terms of RPG design, I think I know the answer to this one, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. Do you have any preference, or have you enjoyed CRPGs, or do you tend to focus more on the JRPG design?
Uh, I focus more on JRPG, specifically for Viola. It's all JRPG. There's
Mm-hmm.
almost no Western RPG stuff in there. Um, because I was such a Nintendo head when I grew up, I've more focused on the JRPG side, but I do actually enjoy CRPGs. I really love Dragon Age. Dragon Age Origins is a game that I've played like 3 or 4 times all the way through from beginning to end. That's a fantastic game. I've tried to get into Pillars of Eternity, but it's not grabbing the
Mm-hmm.
same sort of magic from me.
Yeah.
Wasteland 2 is one that I did enjoy a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Fallout 1 and 2 are amazing games, both of them. Especially 2. That I feel like that's one of my like top 20 games ever. Just on, but more on account of like the writing in Fallout 2 being so witty and so gritty and witty at the same time, and hitting its own stride, like it really being its own thing. I think it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like for me, like the weird thing about like the CRPG genre, I think like you, like my first experience with RPGs was on the JRPG side. I mean, I think literally my first RPG was Final Fantasy, so I didn't really start to play CRPGs until I think it would be like the mid '90s. I remember playing Fallout, Baldur's Gate, games like that, and the CRPG side never really hooked me as much. And it's kind of odd because I've seen, like, especially over this decade, so much growth on that side. You know, people love The Witcher. You mentioned Dragon Age. We have Mass Effect. And of course, a lot of the offerings from the independent side. But they've always seemed like a lot of work to get into, which I know that's a very weird complaint when we just described a JRPG having like 80 hours of playthrough minimum.
Yeah, I think that a lot of RPG stuff that you just described, The Witcher and the Mass Effect, are their RPG is pushed way more in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You get action at the forefront with both The Witcher and Mass Effect specifically. It's like almost all. The further you go along in the series, the more it just goes to like standard third-person shooter. Um, what bothers me mostly about CRPGs is just how old in their design they are and how much stuff there is to learn when you're now used to more streamlined
Yeah.
game mechanics. Especially like CRPGs were born from first edition Dungeons and Dragons, right? Now we have fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, where everything is way simpler. So just comparing like Baldur's Gate 1 to how D&D is played now, for instance, D&D now is way simpler than it was back then.
Yeah. And you are 100% correct there, Yellow. Like, like for me, the CRPG genre is probably like the roughest one to try and go back to and play. Like I remember a few years ago when GOG first came out, I saw they had all the Might and Magic games on sale. Like I never played those. Surely I would enjoy playing them again. Load up the first one. Oh, there's no mouse control, and
Oh my
there's
god.
no in-game map. Like I don't want to play this anymore. I just like backed away slowly from that. And
Yeah.
yeah, like a lot of the CRPGs just they've always been very front loaded, I felt, in terms of their design. And I know they just announced, I think a few weeks ago, for those of you watching this live, that there's going to be a Baldur's Gate 3. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see what they do with that and whether or not
Really
they
weird.
really adhere to those old D&D rules or not.
Yeah, that's going to be weird. As well, I think they will adhere to. I think they will streamline some subjects and just make it easier to understand because now we live in an age where like tutorials are at the forefront of every game.
Yes.
Like back in the day, you had to read the manual to understand what was going on, what you could do, etc. So I think they'll streamline it a bit, but looking at like the success of games like Divinity: Original Sin, that's doing amazing.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, that's just as complex as as old Baldur's Gate used to be, as old Dragon Age Origins used to be.
Mhm.
So I think they'll streamline it some, but still keep it relatively complex compared to some JRPGs.
Yeah. And that's always been like that very interesting mix between, or that comparison between JRPG and CRPG design. Like JRPGs tend to be a lot simpler to get into, but they tend, at least from the ones that I've played, have a little bit more depth, kind of like hidden in terms of their mechanics. Again, like when you do get to play Persona, I'm curious to hear what you think about that kind of design, because the Shin Megami Tensei franchise has always been built on that kind of like training the player to master those systems. And they've kind of eased away from the incredibly hard difficulty of the older ones. I remember Nocturne. I think this was 2001, 2002. That one, the game's like second or third boss was such a gatekeeper that if you didn't master the mechanics by that fight, you were not going to win that battle easily. And they've certainly have walked away from that. They made things a lot easier, but I guess for you, Yellow, like with the RPGs that you've played, like would you agree that JRPGs tend to have like a lot more like I guess under the surface systems to them?
Hmm. I guess that sort of just depends on what JRPG you're playing. Like with Xenoblade, I know that like there's a lot of complexity
Yeah.
under the hood, and a lot to think about during battle. Whereas something like Chrono Trigger, for instance, is actually quite simple. It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward. And games that copy it, like I Am Setsuna from what was it called, RPG Factory,
Mm-hmm.
really underrated JRPG by the way. But that just sort of like added one extra layer of mechanics, and that was it. So it really, there's a big difference in there. They can either be really complex with a lot of like design mechanics under the hood, or they can just sort of stick to what they know.
Yeah. I guess as a question for you, did you have a chance to play Octopath Traveler yet?
I did not.
Because I haven't played that one either, but from the people I've spoken to they've said that is pretty much like classic JRPG design released in 2018 kind of game.
Hmm.
And yeah, like Chris in chat mentioned that the manual's now built into the game. Like we've seen developers trying to streamline a lot of the complexities of these designs, and like you mentioned a few of the classic, or you kind of mentioned a few of the more modern takes on that with Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2, and etc. And like that's always been one of the things I've found very interesting because I've tried playing a few of those more modern entries. We did one. I'm sure somebody watching this who watched one of our grab bag streams can remember the name of it. But I played this game that was very much modeled, like almost part and parcel, under those old CRPG design, and I just could not get into it. Like there was no attempt at kind of modernizing that gameplay. It was very much that old school style of spend the first 30 minutes building a character that if you mess up at any point, you just kind of screwed your whole playthrough for the next
Yeah.
50 hours.
Yeah. That's the kind of game that you need a strategy guide
Yeah.
with to play. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same with Fallout 1 and 2 is like you can build your character in any way, but if you don't have 10 agility, good luck completing this shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's been a problem, but I think that's more of a problem of just bad balancing in a sense. I don't think that the system itself is poorly done. Just think it's balanced poorly. Like every kind of place, if you're doing a game where you're offering lots of different kinds of playstyles to the player, you should make sure that every type of playstyle is equally effective.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uh,
as for what Chris said in
yeah.
the chat about the manuals now built into the game, I actually enjoy it when the game explains stuff to me.
Yeah.
If I have to look stuff up,
Oh,
that's a
yes.
minus. I don't like it. I'll like it less.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that one, Yella. I'm the same way. That it, good design to me, I should not have to, look on websites or guides or watch a YouTube video to figure out how your game
Yeah,
works. And
exactly.
it is very much like high level game design, the titles that get that right. That they can explain these systems in a way that I can learn all organically through playing the game, or the UI is streamlined enough that I can make sense as to what's going on while looking at it.
Yeah, that's one of the. That's definitely a hard thing to
Yes.
design for, though. Especially, obviously, the more complex your mechanics get, the more you have to just give up and say, here's a bunch of text for you to read because I have no idea how to naturally explain to you that like you can spend these kind of points to do this kind of maneuver, but only in this specific scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or
yeah, you're gonna have to like just say like, okay, here's a quick text box, just read this. It's gonna be fun, I promise.
we can also give them bonus points when they design unique what was it? Unique symbols and icons that are never explained in game what they actually mean. That's
Yeah.
always fun.
You mentioned Dark Souls. The first time I played Dark Souls, I
Mm-hmm.
rested at a bonfire and it showed me three things. And I was like, what is humanity? What is this? What does any of that mean? And later on you just kind of find out like, okay, you just need to click on it and just try stuff out and just experiment with it. But it's
Yeah.
that made it really hard for me to initially get into Dark Souls.
Yeah, and like we said with a lot of CRPGs that front load that information, it's kind of like, okay, what does charisma affect? And perception. Okay, I'll put points into that. Oh, but you didn't put points into the other skill. Well, now your character's screwed. Go back and rebuild them
Yeah.
again and again.
Yeah.
Ryan in chat asks a question about Viola. What kind of play modes are you planning to put in? Like, will there be a new game plus, a time trial? Like, what are you planning like along like those secondary or additional content wise?
So what I want to do is, have you ever played Celeste?
Mm-hmm.
That has assist mode where you can like give yourself extra dashes or slow the game down, stuff like that. Basically, stuff to make the game easier. I want to have like a customized setting in the options menu where you can say, okay, I want to uh, make sure that like I don't have to do the rhythm attacks or I don't have to do the spell commands or I can use HP bars. And I also kind of want to do something where you can make stuff harder, right? So like where the timing for your attacks might be tighter, but you'll do more damage or something like that.
Interesting.
Because actually, like some players have showed up to me and said, I kind of want the challenge back from like older RPGs.
Yeah, I
And I was
was.
like, oh, that's something that I've not really heard before. Usually people talk about making things easier nowadays and not necessarily making things harder. But I think it's like, hey, like why not? If I can do one thing, I can do the other thing.
Yeah, and while I was playing Viola on stream, I was actually commenting that to the people. Like, I was wondering if there was going to be kind of more rewards for proper button pressing. Like, again, in the Mario RPGs, if you time the A button right, you can either reduce damage or increase the damage you do to an enemy. I
Yeah.
guess here's one I'm going to test your knowledge on, Yella. Have you ever played the Vagrant Hearts series?
Um, I think I'm confusing it with Valiant Hearts.
Yeah, let me make sure I
Because
actually have
Valiant
the
Hearts
right.
that's the military sort of side scroller, right?
Yeah, let me make sure I got the right name because they're so. I may actually set the wrong one. Let me make sure here. Huh. Oh, I'm sorry. I did confuse it. Not Vagrant Hearts. I think it's Shadow Hearts. There's way too many games that too
There
many RPGs. Shadow Hearts. There it is. Yes.
there are way too many games. That's true.
Yes.
No, I've not heard of that series.
Yeah, with Shadow Hearts, they really pushed heavily into the time button presses for various attacks. They had this thing, it was like a wheel that would spin around, and if you time your button press to the correct notches on the wheel, you would do more damage or you reduce it. And one of the things they did, I think it was starting in the second one, was they actually went as far as allowing you to customize that wheel based on how easy or hard you want to make the game. So there
Okay.
was like the novice wheel that you could press at any time the attack would go through, but you would do less damage. And then for expert players, they had the pro wheel where if you didn't time it right, all your attacks would miss. But if you did get that proper timing, you would do far more damage than you would while using the beginner wheel.
I've literally never heard of that before. That's never
I
nobody's ever told me about that. Sounds
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, like
I
the
feel like
shell.
something like that would be interesting to add to Viola.
Yeah, like the Shadow Hearts franchise, I really don't know how well it did overall. It was popular enough to get 3 games in it, but the last one, when did that one even come out? That was 2005. So we have not seen a new one from them in a very long time. But
People have likely forgotten about it.
eh, But bring this back to Viola, and again, like that kind of trying to balance those difficulties, like we saw with Celeste. Like it is very interesting what you just said about players wanting more complexity and depth. Because, like we've said, like one of the big things about kind of what's going on in game design today is a greater push towards playability and accessibility, which normally means making the game easier or having accommodations for lesser skilled players. I guess
Yeah.
did they give like the people that who play tested the game who said they want things to be harder? Did they give like any justification or a rationale for it?
I think it's just more fun to have a challenge.
Hmm.
There's I have a book nearby, but it basically just has like it's about flow, and it shows like a chart of like
Yeah.
if the player is too bored, but they are of a high certain skill level and they don't get enough challenge, they'll get bored. But if there's too much challenge and they're of that skill level, they'll get disillusioned with the game. They'll be like, "This is too difficult for me. I'm gonna turn this off." And you want your game to be in that flow state where they're in like basically like right in the middle of that, where it's like the game is still challenging them, but not too much. And I think that's just it. If people play the game and it's too easy, like they just blow through it, they'll get bored with it.
Yeah. But as we just said, the on the opposite side of that, if your game is too hard and the player just feels overwhelmed from minute one, they're just going
They'll
to
put it
throw
down.
their hands up and go do something else.
Yeah, I think there's also just been a counter push, like the Sekiro discussion from earlier in the year. I thought was incredibly interesting, but was overloaded with people who were angry,
Yeah.
right? Because I was like, what kind of art medium? Like, there's no other art medium that basically asks the player to be have a certain like dexterity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can sit down with a movie or with a book, and probably get through it and grok most of it. You'll understand most
Yeah.
of it, unless it's a very complex book or movie. And with a game, it's just like, nope. From the get go, we're gonna ask you to you have to do certain things. You have to be a participant. I was like, that's so interesting. And now we have this discussion about like, okay, we want to involve more people in this medium by making it more accessible. But then, what if that non-accessibility is sort of part of the
Yeah.
experience, like Sekiro and Dark Souls? People are proud to beat those games, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've beaten Sekiro, and I was like, this is an amazing feeling.
Mm-hmm.
This feels great.
If we could, we should do like a virtual fist bump for both of us being Sekiro. But yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's the very hard part, and it's very interesting about Viola in terms of having accommodations for the harder side. Because like with something like Sekiro, like one of the complaints a lot of people had was the fact that unlike the Dark Souls series, there was no, I guess, quote unquote buffer in Sekiro. The base of the game said you're going to learn these game systems, or you're not playing this game. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like, oh, if you're having trouble with this boss, you could summon a helper, or you can, respec your build. No, no, that wasn't Sekiro's way. Like if you get stuck at Genshiro, for instance, enjoy the next 20 to 30 hours of
Exactly.
trying to figure out that fight.
Yeah. Dark Souls was in that sense, like compared to Sekiro, was
Mm-hmm.
very accommodating. Just
Yes.
being like, hey, you can use humanity, uh, you can just grind for levels and get stronger, right? You can get
Oh yeah.
stronger gear, as long as you. But again, like Dark Souls also still had that problem of like you had to know what a good build would be, kind of, in order to be really effective. Not completely necessary, but like if you wanted to be stronger and you didn't know like what how to make yourself stronger, you were still in
Mm-hmm.
trouble.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in that sense, Sekiro was almost like, nope, we're letting the leash go that you didn't even know was there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going into deep end now, buddy.
Yeah. And I'm glad we kind of a segue into talking about like the hard side of RPGs because I have a question for you, Ella, and this is also for the audience as well watching. A lot of RPGs, both on the JRPG and CRPG, I'm going to be saying RPG a lot today,
Yeah,
tend to have, we see them have difficulty sliders or difficulty settings. And like for people who know me, I am definitely an action gamer. Like I have played plenty of games on the action side on the hardest difficulties. I played Sekiro. I played Devil May Cry on the as high as I can go. But when it comes to the RPG side, I've kind of shied away from the hard mode that a lot of RPGs have. Because for me, like, it felt like I wasn't really being tested as a gamer. It just felt like they were just throwing more numbers at me. So, my
right.
question for everybody is when you play an RPG that has, let's say, easy, normal, hard, what do you typically play those games at?
It's a good question. I'm personally never a fan of the difficulty slider, um, because it's sort of like you never know what the developer's thinking with it. If they're saying normal is the intended experience, then I'll usually just go for that, just on account of like, okay, that's probably the one they spent the most time on. But like, what's hard to them might not be
Yeah.
hard to me, but also vice versa. Like, what might be easy for the developer might be very difficult for someone else. So to me, I personally am not really a fan of difficulty sliders, especially because, as you said, they just often just throw bigger numbers at you, and more enemies with more health, and you do less damage.
Yeah.
Skyrim is famous for that, just saying like, okay, if it's hard, they have 10% more HP, and it's just not fun. It just
Yeah.
takes longer. Um, but I'm more of a fan of just saying like, okay, well, you can add these things and make things more difficult and get bigger rewards, or you can remove these things just so you can get through the game and play it at your own pace, like Celeste did.
Yeah.
Have you
And
played Bastion and Transistor?
yes, I have certainly played both of them, and yeah, I know what you're going to bring up there about how they let you pick and choose those difficulty modifiers.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
let you pick exactly like, okay, these enemies will get a little stronger, these enemies will do more of that, or you
Hmm.
have less this, and that way you can pick like, okay, well, I have no trouble with these enemies, so I'm fine if they, get stronger, and then I'll get more experience for it.
Yeah. And that, I think, right there is a very interesting point about these kinds of difficulty settings, Yella, and it's something that I've heard a lot of strong arguments for or against, and that is rewarding the player for making things harder. Because there are strong sides or strong opinions for both pro and con, or I'm sorry, for both for and against it. Like, some people will argue that if you reward the player for making things harder, then you're kind of, coercing or pushing them to play the game at a higher setting. While other people will say that, it should just be a reward for playing the game on the harder setting. Like, they don't need anything else. But, like, for myself, I always like it when games reward you for kind of pushing things to that higher scale. Like you said with Bastion and Transistor. Like, I love the fact that when I turn on all those difficulty totems in Bastion, that all of a sudden I could now, kill the grinding because I was making, like, I think it was like 5 to 10 times more experience with each kill.
Yeah. Right. It's fun to be rewarded. Like,
Yeah.
it's fun to not necessarily be rewarded, but be recognized. I think that's more of
Yeah.
it. Like, we both just shared a little fist bump. Like, yeah, both of us beat Sekiro. You know,
Mm-hmm.
That's not a reward, but it's recognition
Yeah.
of skill level, and people love that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're good at something, you want to be recognized for it.
Especially you want the game to kind of let you know, and we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, that it's great when the game acknowledges like your actions like that. It's the same thing with achievements. you know
Yeah.
Jumping up and down for 10 minutes, a player can do that if they want, but it's a different story if the game actually gives you like a little trophy or reward for you doing that crazy action.
Yeah.
And as a quick aside, Ryan asked, will there be a major part of grinding in Viola or not?
No. That's just no. I don't like grinding, and I specifically lay out, like, in Viola. There's no random encounters either, so I know exactly, like, okay, this is the likely path for a player to take. This is how many monsters they'll probably find with some RNG, but like some variants. So I want to know, like, exactly how to skill my enemies to stick with the player's strength level. And if they want to grind, they can grind. Like, if there's people out there who want to grind to the highest level, they can just do that. Go ahead. I don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not necessary. In general, with Viola, I want to tend more to the easier side, just because, like, I want to make sure that people are able to play it and that they're able to just enjoy, the story that the game has to offer.
And I think that's a very interesting point there, Yell, about having set encounters. Because it's something that I'm seeing a lot more from kind of the indie RPG side of things. Because, again, I'm sure everybody watching us right now, and you as well, we've all played an RPG that has random encounters in it. And it's one of those deadly mainstays or holdovers from old school design. And I don't know about you, but that's one thing that I'm kind of glad more developers have moved away from, because I've started to get a little bit tired of random encounters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think random encounters are just not good in almost any game, because you just take out you're taking people out of the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with a platformer, I was like, I cannot have random
Yeah.
encounters on a platformer. Like, are you kidding?
Oh, yes.
Like, that would just be a disaster. So
I'm just having like a vision of a Kaizo game that has it, and you're doing like a incredible set of platform, and then all of a sudden Kaizo RPG boss fight out of nowhere.
yeah, no, that would just not be fun. And there's also, like, the idea of expectation. You want to set, and even if it's just seconds, you want to have players be able to know what's coming ahead of them. So if they see a monster, they're going to be like, oh, okay, it's monster fighting time. Let's do it. Let's have fun. If you're suddenly, like, overwhelming them with a fight, it's like, oh, geez. Oh, okay, I have to get ready for this,
Mm-hmm. And kind of from not this Josh, but another Josh in chat was talking about difficulty sliders can lead the players to not trying as much as they should. Why try when you can just change the difficulty?
It's very true.
And when it comes to like that kind of difficulty modification, older fans of me know what I'm about to mention next. But my all-time favorite RPG that kind of I think got things right was The World Ends With You. If you ever played that one,
Very briefly. On the
Probably-
original DS.
Yeah, probably like one of the oddest JRPGs ever made. And I think it's probably that's why I took to it so well, because it was just such a different beast compared to any other one that I played.
I oh man, it's been a long time since I really touched that game, and
Hmm.
I really just could not stand the control scheme. I was really having trouble,
Yeah.
differentiating between the two screens and the two control schemes. So that turned me off pretty quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, and they've been trying to like with the remasters and the re-releases. They've been doing it on a single screen kind of game or having a touch screen more of an interface. And yeah, it's one of those weird games. I think for the people who loved it, it's one of their favorite games. But if it
Yeah.
didn't hook you, then you probably have no desire to play that title.
Yeah, there's no in between for that one. I
Yeah.
feel like it's almost the same with that's in general what you have with games that are slightly more difficult. Like the people that love Dark Souls, myself
Yeah.
included. The
Mhm.
people that don't like Dark Souls stay as far away as possible from Dark Souls.
Yep.
But I don't think that's bad. Like you're
Yeah.
aiming for with every game, you're aiming for a target audience, right?
Mhm. For sure.
Like with a game like Viola, I'm specifically targeting people who enjoy games like Undertale, just the cutesy indie RPGs with a story that you can fall in love with characters that you can enjoy.
Mhm.
Um, that's the target audience I'm aiming for. I'm not aiming for hardcore Kaizo platforming fans. Like they're not gonna have the same fun with Viola, and that's okay. Like you need to have you should focus on what you're good at designing as a designer. You should know like, okay, this is my skill set, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at. And I'm gonna make a game that focuses on those aspects as opposed to making something that's sort of all over the place because you feel like, yeah, this the most amount of people will like it. You shouldn't do that. You should make something like just like like, okay, this specific group of people are gonna love this game and they're going to spread it to their friends and they're going to make sure that everybody who loves that kind of game will end up playing it.
Mhm. Yep. And as you said, it's also very important from a development standpoint to know who your intended market is, because we've seen developers unfortunately struggle in the past with trying to throw everything in their game as possible.
Yeah.
It's going to be an RPG shooter meant for everybody of all skill levels, and it usually turns out not being as enjoyable. And this again, not only with Viola, but with other games that tend to combine genres, that they run into that problem. That, um, for instance, like this was one of the issues for me when I played Fallout 3. I think it was Fallout 3, and especially with Bethesda's formula for their RPGs, where my brain is telling me that I am playing an action game, that I'm moving around, I'm shooting, I'm aiming, but the actual game is an RPG. When I pull the trigger in Fallout, all the stats come into play as to whether or not I'm actually hitting
Yeah.
the enemy or I'm doing damage. And conversely, there are people who probably played Borderlands who thought, okay, it's a role playing shooter, but I need, Twitch FPS skills to have any chance of playing that game.
Yeah. I feel like in general, this is a problem with AAA games,
Mm-hmm.
like big games, especially because you just have like a huge company with, hundreds of game designers and they're all like, well, gotta put my thing in the game somehow, right? Like I gotta do the thing I'm good at. Um, and they have the time and the resources for it, so that's why you end up with games that are just overblown with mechanics. Think about last year's Spider-Man on the PS4, for instance. There are stealth sections in there, and there's puzzle mini games. There's so much to do, and it's like, man,
Yeah.
I want to be Spider-Man. I want to swing, and I want to punch bad guys, and that's in there. But it has so much other stuff, and in general, people are like, I don't like this other stuff, right? I
Yeah.
love being Spider-Man, don't like the other stuff, but that's going to be a trend for AAA games just on account of like the size of their
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah, and we definitely saw that in the last decade as well, with again many action games having everybody's favorite, the impromptu stealth section, when you lose all your weapons, and you have to
Yep.
spend 30 minutes or so wandering around before you can actually get back to what you were doing.
And it's also how you get stuff like where I've played God of War recently on the
Hmm.
PS4. Even though it's an amazing game, it has a crafting system. I'm like, man, I
Mm.
don't care.
Yeah.
Like I wanna have fun with the combat and explore Atreus and Kratos' relationship,
Hmm.
and making a better chest armor has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because when that's another kind of holdover that we especially see in the JRPG genre. Although I'm sure there are CRPGs that have done this as well, when they just have all these different subsystems that are designed around kind of like the min maxing part of the game, where it's like here's a JRPG combat, but there's also a crafting system. There's that kind of a skill board thing now. I think that started in what was it, Final Fantasy X, I want to say, where you can have this massive skill tree. But then there's also a dating mini game, and there's a cooking mini game, and there's like 10 different mini games of
Yeah.
stuff that you can play, and you may have no interest in them, but the developers, of course, will lock the best gear in the game to this kind of system.
Yeah. It's the same with God of War. Like the
Mm-hmm.
best gear is like behind the crafting, so you better go find your Asgardian steel to get your chest armor up, or you're gonna have more trouble on these fights
Yeah.
than you really feel like you should.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of an artificial way to make the player feel like you're getting better at the game. Like with God of War specifically, you can be very good at the game because it's such a deep combat system where you can dodge and you can block and you can play it perfectly. But if you just don't have enough damage, like the fight's gonna take an hour, you might,
Yep.
take one hit and die
Oh
because your
yes.
health is too low. So you have to spend time building better armor, and it's like, oh, that just takes the speed out of the game, and it makes you less interested in what's going on with Kratos and Atreus, which is to me was like one of the main draws with that game. I was really taken in by how real their relationship felt, and that's you take the speed out of the game, and it's like, okay, well, now I care a little bit less about the fact that Atreus is angry at his father.
Yeah. And that dissonance between kind of the gameplay and the RPG systems. Again, like that's one of the things that's annoying me about a lot of the AAA titles these days, where I'm playing this action-heavy game. I hit the guy with my sword, and the game says, "Oh, you're 5 levels below this guy. You do 1 point of damage. He hits me with a lucky strike. He does like 500 points of damage." And
Yeah.
again, it's always that risk when you're trying to combine these different systems together. And I want to ask you, Yellow, like, what do you think about kind of this merging of RPG and action-based design? Again, obviously with Viola, like it is an old school JRPG kind of gameplay loop, but we have certainly seen over this decade just how much developers have combined RPG and action. I mean, we've had some fun discussions on the channel here on the podcast with, is Call of Duty an RPG now because there's a leveling system?
Yeah, exactly. You can level up your guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna mention that. Well, Viola is like a classic JRPG where everything is contained within the battle screen, sort of like everything about your stats is just gonna reflect back on how well you'll do in
Mm-hmm.
battle, and there's no skill check, like there's no action gameplay other than like the rhythmic, tapping, like the QTs that you get. But
Mm-hmm.
those are simple enough on purpose that you should, you know, understand those pretty quickly, and you'll start hitting those perfect hits like pretty quickly. And like maybe you'll have one or two failures on the spell before you get like, okay, this is how I do that.
Mm-hmm.
So like all the strength that you get from your stats, and that's immediately apparent because there's no action element to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also specifically, you mentioned before that like there's no Mario and Luigi-esque block in Viola, which is also sort of on purpose to kind of not really gate the player, but to sort of make the HP juggling a part of the game. Because
Mm-hmm.
Mario and Luigi can be very easy if you're
Yeah.
constantly blocking everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Firelight, you can now actually still have those tense moments of like, oh geez, my guy's about to die and I'm out of potions. What do I do? Or like, okay, I'm at full health now, but suddenly it's there around, and like one guy gets attacked really quickly. Now Fenris is at 2 HP, and I gotta give him a potion. So it's more about like
Mm-hmm.
making quick adaptations to your game plan rather than just following the same game plan over and over and executing on it correctly.
Yeah.
In that sense, which is something that I've always enjoyed about RPGs in general. Is just that feeling of quickly adapting to what you're facing and what the situation is, and that's what turn-based combat is good at, right?
Yeah. And like you said, that kind of planning, of course, is a really big part about JRPGs. And my voice is dying. 1 second.
No problem.
It's always a good sign when my voice dies in the middle of a podcast. It means we're having a good conversation. But yeah, like that kind of strategic planning has always been a favorite of mine. Like I love like dungeon crawlers where I can build my own party. I decide what tactics I want to use and go along those lines. And it's something that you don't really get in the more action-heavy games. Again, because of the fact that they are relying on the player's skill and mastery. Like you can't do strategic planning in a game like Sekiro, for instance,
Yeah.
and go around like that.
No, the only planning you can do in Sekiro is like knowing exactly which moves to do when.
Yeah, and adapting to what the enemy will throw at you.
Yeah, but it's much more reactionary and
Yeah,
reaction based.
yeah. Now, as a quick time check, we are just about going to be hitting an hour in terms of our talk. I figure again, like we could sit here for 3 to 4 hours, like it's nothing. But we'll try to shoot for like an hour and 15. I think an hour and 30. I think as our stop point. If that works for you.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I think we can. I mean, we can just ask a few more. There are probably maybe a few more questions that
Yeah.
you wanna ask.
Mm-hmm. We also have a
Anyone
question.
in the chat? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We had a question from Ryan in chat. As Viola is based around story, are there hidden lore bites behind secrets to reward exploration?
Yep. There just are. Like, just look around a little bit more, and there won't be as much in the first early access build because the levels are a little more linear to make sure that you're set up, you're understanding the mechanics, you get all your party members together. At that point in the game, you're already like, your brain is already like trying to map those things away. So there's not going to be that many lore secrets in the first build. But after that, I want to put more and more of that in there.
And I have a few questions kind of rumbling around in my head about, again, combine the platformer and RPG gameplay that I want to kind of throw at you now while we still have the time for them. One thing that I was curious about, and again, getting back to this idea of combining two very different game systems together, and that's the fact that Viola, as an RPG, it also has level design to it, again, because of the platforming aspects. And that's not something that we typically see in an RPG. The most we get is maybe the design of a dungeon in terms of how maze like it is or what puzzles you find. But while we were playing Viola on stream, it is very much designed as a platformer. Obviously, as you know, as for people who watched us, like you have to jump around. You have to figure out how do I get up to that platform to get the treasure chest or get around that enemy. And I want to ask you, like, what is your approach to level design, like specifically on the platformer element of it?
My approach to level design is, first of all, that the player never takes damage. That was the most important part because that's such a big part of 2D platformers nowadays. Is that you hit the spikes, you die, and you restart, right? I wanted to remove that part of the equation, and that immediately brought me more to like Metroidvania style gameplay, where you have like a big map that like sort of sprawls around. But I wanted to have that feeling of progression of beating a level and then going on to the next one. Because the huge open maps in Metroidvania are already like, you don't always know where to go in games like Hollow Knight or in Metroid. So adding JRPG stuff to that, like adding JRPG battles to that, might just slow things down. So I definitely wanted a part where like you can go from beginning to end, and you have a little reward in story, like usually at the end of the level. But I did want to have like the sprawling paths where you can go, like you don't have to go always from left to right. You can go up. You can start wall jumping. Oh wait, I can go down here below these platforms and find a little secret chest there, or maybe I have to find, maybe I have to fight an enemy there first. Um, I wanted to have that. There's also a few parts where I put the player on a linear path so they can get the idea of like a new mechanic. For instance, when you first see the cannons in the game, the ones that like launch you in a specific direction, I make sure that okay, you're just gonna have a linear path so that you always have to run into these cannons, so that you start to get like, okay, this is how the cannons work.
Yeah.
Um, when I'm not doing that, I just let the player usually choose between different paths, like 2 or 3 paths, and they can choose like, okay, well, I see this enemy here. I don't want to fight that. I'm gonna pick another path. Or oh, I see a chest over there, but to do that, I have to jump over here and fight this guy. Oh, but there's a chest. Okay, I'll do it.
And one thing that I really liked about the platform was I was able to actually get around enemies by actually performing the triple jump properly. And I could kind of been rewarded for more of the exploration that way.
Yeah, that's part of the game as well. Is that if you don't want to fight an enemy, you can just be like, well, I'm just gonna jump over it, or I'm gonna wall jump, or I'm gonna take another path. But that'll make the game a little more difficult later on because there are going to be like gates. There are just some enemies that are going to be like in front of a hallway that you're not going to be able to avoid, or there's going to be a boss. So there are going to be like these sort of level gates, like expecting people to be like, okay, you're going to have to be level 3 to get past this part. So it'll be interesting to see what people do with that. A couple fans have actually, or a couple friends, I should say, have actually been like, oh, I want to speed run this game and see like, how many enemies I should be tackling and which enemies I can skip. And I've also like found out that like there's a mini boss in the 4th level in like the maze forest, which is this black wolf, which is pretty tough. You can just triple jump, wall jump, and just completely avoid it. And I was like intending that to be another experience game, but when I did that, I was like, "Whoa, you can do that! That's awesome. We're keeping that. That's great. That's fun. It's also sort of fun to feel like you're smarter than the game,
Mm-hmm. I gotta ask: is there any like speedrun tech that can actually get you to skip the final fight in the game? Can someone just like
Again,
skip the right triple jump over the final boss?
no. There's gonna be most of the bosses, like the actual bosses, like how Justice is in the church in level 3. Um, those are story related, so I want to make sure that the player does that. Um, so there's gonna be gates, like you're gonna have to have a certain level. But like I said, I don't want to make the player grind as well, so it'll like move towards the easier side. But then people are gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna break it in such a way that I can do it at level 1 or I can do it at level 2. That's gonna be an interesting balancing act during early access, I think.
Yeah. Now, regarding like the exploration side of things, one thing that I noticed while I was playing the or the pre-early access build was that the various treasure chests that we found were all basically consumable based. Will there be like any gear or equipment in Viola?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've played the most recent build, but in the initial build that I sent to people, which had just the first 2 levels,
Yeah.
it was just consumables.
Okay.
After that, when gems are introduced, which are basically like
Okay.
um, they're like stat boosters, but they also take away stats. They're sort of like a simplified equipment system. So you
Okay.
can have a gem, and it'll be like a basic gem will be like +3 to strength, but better gems will be like, okay, this is +6 to strength, but -3 to defense, for instance. So every gem that you equip is going to be like a little trade-off, like so you can think like, okay, I want to make sure that this guy gets stronger, and I don't care if he's slower.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you can sort of build your character in a way that um, is more fun to you, or a way that you think they're more useful. Especially Viola, whose stats are actually like more average across the board. Like she just is kind of good at everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can just be like, well, she's good at attacking, but I like her blow beat spell so much that I'm just gonna put magic gems on her that lower her defense or lower her attack, and I'm just gonna use that spell a lot with her.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can be like, well, she's good at healing, so I'm gonna add more magic, or I want to make her better at attacking. I'm gonna go add more attack stuff, or no, I want to attack more with Fenris and make Viola defensive. Right, I'm gonna add defensive gems to her. That's been I think that's actually been pretty fun. I personally like those sort of min maxing elements, although they are much simpler than in other JRPGs. So it's been personally, I think it's fun to like play around with, making sure that there's a character called Soleil who is super tanky but not very fast and not very good at magic. I like just like going all in on defense with her and just using the block button every time, and then you see enemies doing like 0 damage to her, and that's like, yeah, that's really like its own brand of satisfactory.
Yeah, again, that min maxing at that level is always fun. As you said earlier, it really allows a player to try and feel like they're one upping the game when they figure out that perfect combination of gems or the right skills, or even just at the simplest level, just having like your perfect party composition. Like I've played RPGs. I think what was it? I think it was one called like Radia Historia.
Radiant Historia.
Yeah, I think that was like a time travel one, and even the Persona games, where when you get that perfect combination of party members and skills all synergizing, you can just lay waste to the game. And it's always
Yeah,
that great aha moment when you figure it out.
yeah, that's just fun in general to like feel like your tactical mastery of the game is helping you not just beat it but like destroy it, right?
Yeah.
I saw a video of Viola where someone was having trouble beating one of the bosses in the game in the
Mm-hmm.
early access build, and they were like, "Wow, it's really difficult," even though like I thought I was a high enough level and the game was relatively easy. But I remember just being like, you know, equipping all my magic guys on all my magic gems on Nico because he did super effective or double damage against the boss, and then specifically saying, "All right, I'll guard with this character, buff this character using that character, and then use a lot of water spells over and over and over." And with that, I like beat the boss in like 2 turns.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "No, is this too easy, or am I just
Mm-hmm.
do I just know the game that well?"
Yeah, and going back to Nocturne, that was pretty much required by the design. Because that game was all about exploiting enemy weaknesses and making sure your party could defend against them. And that can always be a very tough balance, as we've talked about before. That if it becomes required, as in, if order to beat this boss, I must use, the perfect min max strategy, then people feel like they're being punished, for trying to experiment or do something else.
Right.
Question from Chris in chat. Is Maple Story or Wonder Boy part of your inspiration? He said that he thought those were some of the first RPG platformers.
I've never played either of those, so no. My main inspiration was I would say Lisa, like we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
a sort of reverse inspiration in that it's I was so frustrated with the game. But most of my inspiration comes from Undertale and Owlboy and Mario and Luigi. It's like just newer, shorter RPGs and indie games that are just like sort of paving the way for indies nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is one design question that I had for you that I'm curious how your answer to this. And it kind of is, again, part of this whole combination of the platformer and the RPG side. And that is that from playing the game, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may get added later on, it didn't feel like there was a huge connection between the two systems. And I'll give you the example that I was thinking of. Like going back again to like the Paper Mario and just like the Mario RPGs in general, as we all know, if you could time, like let's say you hit the attack button before the fight begins or you jump on the enemy, you get like an initial reward for doing that. In Viola, like if I jump on the enemy or if I hit him from behind or walk into them, like there's no reward for that. And I want to ask you if there were any considerations for, again, trying to blend or blur those two systems together, or do you want to keep them separate in that regard?
It's the thing is, I've been thinking about that from the beginning. Like
Mm-hmm.
okay, if you jump on something, you should get like a little extra damage to start off the game with. But as I said before, when I started, I was sort of a novice programmer. Like I basically didn't know anything about programming in general, and it proved to be a little difficult. And also, like in the playtest builds where I weren't in, people weren't mentioning it at all. Like I would have like people playtest it in like a very early state, and they would just not say anything about it. And I was like, okay, well, that's strange. Yeah, I thought people would bring that up right away, and people continued not to bring it up. And I was like, well, that kind of mechanic is going to cost me another week of work, and nobody's mentioning it. I can put that week of work somewhere else. And that's sort of how do you put it? That's a rough way to think about it. Like, oh, if they're not mentioning it, I'm not going to do it. But it's sort of like putting in that mechanic could cost a week of work that I could put into making a better story moment, you know, or maybe putting in an extra side quest or just anything else that isn't that. So if people aren't, you know, mentioning it enough, then I'll probably just
Yeah.
won't bother. But if enough people are going to say like, hey, I really want that in there,
Hmm.
then yeah, obviously I'm going to do it, right? Because then it's like, okay, people want that, and it's a point of feedback for a lot of people. If people aren't missing it, then like, okay, maybe I shouldn't.
And again, like for people just tuning in, Viola is not out on early access yet. It is due out on the 23rd, so in 7 days. So it will be very interesting to see kind of like when more people get their hands on it, what they say about that. Because I'm sure, like with people playing this game or looking at it, you're going to have platformer fans just as you're going to have JRPG fans. And it's going to be interesting to see like where they kind of fall on the merging of these two genres.
Right. I think it's mostly still. I still mostly see Viola as an RPG,
Hmm.
simply because the platforming. Like I've taken out a lot of stuff that people enjoy about platformers nowadays. Um, so I think mostly people who, and you know, we in games we often talk about genres as if that's the end all be all of like why people play a certain games. I don't play a game just because there are stats and there's a party. I
Yeah.
play an RPG because they usually have a story that I enjoy, and that's what RPGs are known for, and it's hopefully what Viola is going to be known for. And most people who play platformers are like, I want, you know, high octane action with a bit of challenge.
Hmm.
They don't necessarily want a story. So I
Yeah.
think more RPG fans are going to flock towards Viola than platforming fans.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see like what people think because I'm going to bet that you're going to get comments on the forums about people saying, you know, why isn't this Kaizo difficulty, or I want, you know, spinning blade traps like Super Meat Boy in the game.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like that's gonna be weird. That's also the one of the hard things about being a game designer is knowing just as well like what to listen to, but also what
Hmm.
to ignore sometimes.
Yeah. And again, like we just had a whole discussion about feedback yesterday on our live stream. So if we do that now, we'll be here for another 2 hours. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, it is a very important topic when it comes to these kinds of games. I guess. Oh, as another quick warning for the people watching this live, we are probably going to be wrapping this up in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So this will be officially last call for any questions
yep.
for Yella about Viola, RPG, platforming gameplay, anything like that. So please get them in now in the next few minutes as we will be wrapping it up very shortly.
I do want to say there's something that I saw in the chat from
Hmm.
Chris
Yeah.
about the wish list for later. I
Hmm.
definitely have that. I have a giant design document with all the stuff that I want to put in the game, and everything that's like a maybe is also in there. But I do know from experience, maybes are very often not getting into a game. Like I've made 3 different games, even if they're on mobile, they're still like they're games. You're making a game.
Hmm.
Um, the maybes and the nice to haves are just probably not gonna be in there. You're gonna have to you're gonna focus on the stuff that has to be in there
Yeah.
first. Make sure that that's polished, that it's very fun. That part is, you know, good, and your little nice to have not to be rude, but it's probably not making it in there.
Yeah.
But I do have a list, and if there's time, and like I said, like if there's enough feedback for something, that's obviously going to move something up the list.
Hmm.
We've had that before where we had a certain mechanic or a certain like explanation in a nice to have, and then game testers would come in and say, "You really need like I don't know what I'm doing here, or I don't understand this part," and then like okay, that nice to have is gonna bump up to a must have because that's more important than we thought it was.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of questions we can certainly delve into. But to kind of get to our final section for today's cast, and if you're free in the future, it'll be always great to have you back on for a follow up. Because, again, we can sit here and talk about RPGs all day long.
Yeah, probably. There's so many of them.
Oh, yes. But I do have a few. Before we get to a few early access questions, are there any elements regarding the gameplay of Viola that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up now?
Hmm.
Anything we missed, or in this, everything we've talked about so far?
I don't think so.
All right.
Not really. No, like gameplay wise in general, like Viola is pretty simple compared to most JRPGs,
Mm-hmm.
which is on purpose as well. Uh, Mostly because it's just me, like I can only do so much. Um, I do want to add a little bit more. Like I've noticed that I often default to the same strategies as well while playing. So I want to add a little something to the battle system where you're gonna run into more trouble. Like just I want to add status effects basically. I've noticed
Mm-hmm.
that I missed, having to react to more situations and like adding something like, oh crap, my character that I was gonna attack with is now stunned. Like I have to skip a turn. Like it'll be simple still, but I want to add something like that. But that it's going to be for the next early access update.
Okay. All right. So with that, my final set of questions for you will be kind of centered more on the early access and what you have planned for it, and that will probably take us to the end, or that will definitely take us to the end for our discussion
Yeah,
for today.
that'll be the last
Yeah.
few.
So, as you said earlier, you started working on Viola about a year ago. Was that right?
Yeah, a year and 4 months.
Okay.
March the 1st last year is when I started.
Okay. And there's one question I always like to ask developers who go on to early access. I guess what kind of led you to putting Viola on early access now, as opposed to either earlier or later in the development?
Well, if I put it out earlier, there just wouldn't have been as much to play. I wanted the first initial build to just have like a solid amount of levels and like
Mm-hmm.
just so you're not running into like a death screen 10 minutes in, right? So the first build is gonna have like 90-ish minutes of gameplay, a little more if you're very explorative, or if you run into a game over, you're gonna have more game time. But I wanted to make sure that you're not immediately like running into like this is the end of the early access build, which has happened to me. I've run into a game once that was very interesting. It was a sort of space exploration game, sort of walking simulator on
Mm-hmm.
Mars or something. And 20 minutes in, it was like, nope, this is all the game that there is right now. And I was like, oh man, and I never returned to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I didn't get invested enough to
In that initial
really to
play.
bank on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And later, if I release it even later, we're gonna run into troubles where you're getting later on in the year, and there are gonna be more high-profile releases uh, that you don't want to be involved in. You don't want to have to compete against the big boys
Yep.
with your early access release, especially because early access already has the issue of being early access. Like Steam pushes early access games less to the player. That's a known issue with Steam, I guess you could call it. So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in that you're releasing your early access in a at a date where you have the least amount of opposition.
Yeah.
Exactly, as New Shark said, like next month is where that line is at, and that's exactly right. You
Yeah.
don't want to go, you don't want to go past August if you're an indie game.
Yeah, especially again, like AAA is usually, I think, like September to November is usually,
Exactly.
like, again, like the big push. It's the pre-holiday season to get those
Yeah,
games out.
yeah. You want to avoid that
Yeah.
timeline as much as possible.
And I think another big point is that you want as many eyes on your game in early access, especially for feedback related purposes. You want people to test your game so what are they thinking, what do they like, what do they dislike, and obviously, very importantly, what bugs are they finding that I can fix.
Right. Yeah. And also, like, is it resonating with people? Because if people aren't like, if people are playing it and they're just like, yeah, it's fun, and then they don't talk about it with anybody else, like they don't spread it or they don't get really enthusiastic about it, then it's like, okay, there's something wrong here. Because just making a game that's all right, if you can market that to enough people, that's okay. Then it's fine. But you need all the leg up you can get, right? Like you need that mouth to mouth. What's it called?
Word of mouth.
Advertisement, almost. Like, yeah, the word to mouth. Exactly. Thank you. Sorry, I said something completely different. You need that word to mouth to make sure that the game gets spread enough that it gets like at least enough of a following that you can sell a certain amount of units.
Yep.
If you're not going to sell that amount of units, then you're out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about Undertale, it literally just like a friend of mine told me
Yep.
when it came out, like, yo, this game is fucking solid. Play it. And I was like, sure, never heard of it before, but you told me I love it. I'll play it. And that's like word of mouth is the foremost like way for people to really to connect with new games, because there are so many games coming out every day on Steam, right? If Steam tells me, well, 20 new games came
Yeah.
out yesterday, I'm going to be like, all right, I'm not going to look at any of these. But if a friend of mine tells me, this new game is it's really awesome, I really enjoyed it, you should play it, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look it up.
Yeah, we do our every week we do our live show. We look at the weird games coming out for that next week, and yeah, there's quite a lot of games being released these days.
Yeah.
And like the same thing happened with me with Darkest Dungeon. On a forum that I visited, someone said this is a hardcore dungeon crawling rogue. I'm like, okay, like that, just like right up my alley right there. Just like someone say, hey, we have a new platformer you want to play. Or someone suggested me another run and gun Contra like last night that I downloaded the demo to. But yeah, like word of mouth is definitely very important these days when it comes again to these to games from the independent space. Because like when you look at a new release list on Steam, you can't tell what's a legitimate game from what isn't. And in many cases, when we look up like the list, like it'll be kind of like shovelware, 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 amazing game, shovelware, 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 that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Or just not even shovelware, but just mediocre
Yeah.
games, like that are, of course, they're allowed to. I'm not saying like, oh, mediocre game shouldn't be there, but like, you don't like. There's so many of them. Like they're flooding Steam in particular because Steam doesn't do any kind of, they don't have any sort of quality control. They barely even check if your game works. It was really surprising to me that like when I got onto Steam and there's 100, like you pay $100 and you can have a page on Steam. It is literally that
Yep.
easy. And there's nobody on Steam on Valve Center like, okay, well, we're gonna look at this game and see if it matches our content. Like if it's the kind of game that we want on our platform. It's not even that.
Yep.
You're just free to do everything you want with it until even almost up to release date. Well, they'll be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna check if it works, if it starts up, if it matches like the features that you're putting on your store page, and like if microtransactions work. It's the only thing they check, and it's staggering. It's like,
Yep.
how is that possible? That's why like Steam is such a, I don't want to say it, but it's just a pile of shitty games at this point because it's so easy to just offload all of your stuff on it.
Yep. And again, like these are conversations we've had many times here on the channel, and we'll probably continue to keep having as well into the
Well,
future.
yeah, as long as Valve, continues to do nothing about these things,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as like the internet propaganda machine keeps going on, hating on other browsers, like just
Yep.
been happening with Epic. Like, not to excuse Epic Games from what some of the like shadier stuff they've done, but
Mm-hmm.
more in the sense of like, they do one thing bad and suddenly Steam is like the best thing ever.
Mm.
You should never have another platform other than Steam when there are so many problems with Steam.
Oh yes,
So
and it's
yeah,
going to be like we've been saying this for the last few months. It's going to be very interesting to see how things shake out with kind of the new wave of competitors to Steam. We have Epic, we have Discord, we have
yeah,
itch.io. And while I'm again like when we say itch.io and the other ones, like we're not expecting them to tomorrow be the new Steam, but it's going to be very telling to see how Valve reacts to more competition and what the competition is going to bring to the table to try
yeah,
and court more people to it. Again, Epic has certainly been in the news for the fact, oh, they have news. Oh, that sucks. Um, Epic has certainly been in
Discord.
news for buying up exclusives, which has pissed off a lot of people. But it's also their way of sticking it to Steam. And there are a lot
Yeah,
of developers out there who are more than happy to do that, again, due to the aforementioned problems. And we could certainly start listing a lot of them.
yeah. I mean, a friend of mine has asked me promise me you won't go to the Epic store, and I'm like, if Epic pays me enough
Yeah.
money to stay alive,
Uh huh.
I will gladly go to the Epic
Yes.
store, right? Like if they pay me another
Mm-hmm.
2 years of my life,
Yeah.
like hell yeah, I'm going over there. Sorry, because Steam is not going to do that for me. Steam is
It,
going to be like, yeah, well, I'm taking my 30% and you do whatever.
it reminds me of like a Double Fine when they got bought by Microsoft. Like put a video with Tim Shaver, like very sad violin music, and he was saying, so it was a hard decision, but Microsoft came to us and say, would you like lots of money to stay in business? And I was like, yeah, I think I would like lots of money to stay in business. I think I'm going to take
Exactly.
this deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's the reality
Mm-hmm.
of making anything
Yeah.
creative in in how we've I don't want to spread the meme of we live in a society, but it's how it works. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to play along with the game, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of players don't like that, and
Yeah.
I get that. Like I fully understand that, but it's just what reality is like. You have
Mm-hmm.
to make money.
Yeah. If there's no money coming in, you don't have a game, basically.
Exactly.
And let me see here. Again, we can just keep on going if we wanted to, but a few final early access questions for you,
Yeah.
and we'll end it there. So,
Yeah.
for people watching this right now, how long are you planning on staying in early access for?
I don't want to stay in early access for more than a year.
Okay.
So hopefully I'll be done April 2020. That's my hopeful release date, but that sort of depends. Like if I want to add more stuff, obviously it's gonna take more time. But I don't want to go any later than July 2020. But
Okay.
hopefully it won't even go that far.
Okay.
And
Now,
I plan on like doing updates like major updates to the game every 2 months with new mechanics and new levels.
okay. Now, you said this earlier. The version that I played, this was about, at the time of this stream, probably at least 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. Is that the same version that's going to be the early access build, or is the early access build now different than that?
I think the one you played is an older version.
Okay.
We're now at a version where there's 4 levels in total,
Okay.
4 recruitable characters. There's a full boss
Okay.
fight in a church.
I
There's
see.
a town to explore. So you're gonna there's quite a bit there.
Okay. Yeah, so that is definitely different than the build that I played.
Right.
Okay. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else really quickly early access related. You said, of course, you're planning for maybe every 2 months to have a major update out for it.
Yeah.
I think, other than getting to very low level discussions, like nitpicky stuff, I think that's all the early access questions I have. I guess anything regarding early access that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up.
It's gonna be. I'm gonna sell my game. It's gonna be $10 in early access.
Okay.
And once it gets out of early access, the price will be raised to 15.
Okay.
So it's at a reduced price. It's basically like a sort of quote unquote sale for the entirety until early access.
Shark had a question. Do you have an exit plan for going out of early access? I guess. Do you have anything like major or like what's going to be like your major point that the game will leave early access and hit 1.0?
Just getting to the end of the story, basically. Like right now, it's just I've already made the ending essentially, just so that I can, if the game doesn't do as well in early access, I can shorten it. I can just cut levels and cut side quests out of it, and still like already have the ending part done, and I can just shorten the game essentially. But yeah, it's just gonna be like the player has to be able to play the game from start to finish and have the complete story.
And I think that's a very important point about Viola, especially when we go to early access, that this is not a randomized or procedurally generated game. Like, this is not a roguelike in design. Like, there is a set beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And when we talk about games like that, it's always challenging knowing how that game will do on early access, because a lot of the games that I've played on EA that I've really enjoyed have been the randomized or replayable ones. We've played Slay the Spire, Dead Cells, etc., etc. And for games that are fixed in that regard, I don't know, it may be a little trickier for Viola, because I know there are going to be people who are going to play the game and they're going to beat every build the second you put it out there. And it's going to be tricky, I think, to see like how people who play the game, early access build 1 are going to find the game at 1.0.
Yeah, that is going to be tricky. You're right in that like most of the games that do well during early access are the ones that are procedural and that you can play continuously and that are quickly updated every like week or so to adjust a few game mechanics or add a few new items to use. And Viola is going to be a fixed story. It's going to be from beginning to end, and in between it's going to add more stuff. Hopefully, like I've been working with the indie bros to do marketing, and the plan is to once 1.0 releases, that's when we're going to reach out to press in a slightly bigger way than what we've been doing now, in hopes that the game catches on then, and then like everyone that has played up before is like those are the hardcore fans that I really love and get shout outs in the game. And they have a cheaper game. That's also part of it, is like you can buy it if it looks interesting to you, but you're like, well, I want to play it when it's an entire story. Buy it now when it's the cheapest, and then you'll just have it when it's done. They'll save you $5 and you can spend that on donating to the game with them.
Thank you. That was a very clever plug there. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mojo.
I just saw someone do it in the chat.
But again, we can certainly keep on talking, but we've kind of already gone over our first prediction. And again, with it being 6-hour time difference, it's almost, I guess, 11 where you're at. So
it's almost 11.
I better let you go before everyone starts to fall asleep. But it has been a pleasure talking with you about Viola, and again about RPG design this afternoon/evening. But I always say to all of our developers, come on, I do wish you the best of luck with Viola. I already played it, like we said. I'm definitely going to give it another run through when it hits officially early access, so I can see what the new build is. And yet, as the game continues, it'll be great to have you back on, kind of as updates, or even just as a post-mortem when the game is finished.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
All right. But, like I said, hang on Discord for like 30 seconds when we wrap things up. For the people watching us live or record right now, we're going to end things for the cast here. For you, Jelle, in terms of social media, are there any places you would like to plug right now before I let you go?
You can visit Viola on Twitter at @GameViola. And there's also a link to the Discord right on the Twitter page, right at the top. So come out and join our little community.
And if you like game wisdom, the stuff that I do, be sure to check out our Discord channel that is linked down below, and it is open to everyone as well. But that is going to do it for this week, or for this week's cast. If you're watching this recorded right now and would like to get an early and ad-free version of it, be sure to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/GWBicer. I'll be back tonight for our regular game streams, and if you are a developer working on a recent release or upcoming game and would like to come on and talk about it, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But that is going to do it for our